So excited to talk to you about what happened in June. We had two big milestones for us, and I think this is our time to reflect on what we enjoyed, the ups and downs of the hackathon and our course.
Yeah, that's right. So we didn't put out any Substack articles in June, but that doesn't mean we weren't doing anything. In fact, we were probably busier in June than we've ever been. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm glad we finally have some time to debrief and go over some of the highlights from the two events. So do you
Yeah,
want to kick us off? Let's talk about the hackathon first, which happened at the beginning of June. The hackathon was a pretty wild ride, but to start us off, why don't you just give a brief overview of what it was?
sure. I'll keep it super brief. It was a 48-hour virtual event that started on June 9th and lasted all weekend. And basically, we brought together all sorts of stakeholders in healthcare and health technology and digital health. And so we had folks who were software engineers, clinicians, product talent, and those people were either transitioning to health tech from another industry, or they were entrepreneurs looking for a co-founder, and or just anyone who really was curious about AI in healthcare. And that really was the theme of the hackathon: is how do you apply AI in healthcare? And we collected a robust amount of sponsors to support the event. We um, had over 20 sponsors, five VC firms participated. We had folks supporting us with their data platforms and data sets. We also had care delivery companies, and we had patient empowerment companies. And really, this is how they all tie together: is that the hackathon was centered around three tracks. And one track was called Data Insights, another one was Patient Empowerment, and the last one was Care Delivery. And basically, all teams came together and picked a track, and then they built content for those tracks, and at the end had a demo day. And also we had two additional categories which people were eligible for. One was focused on best AI application, and the last one was focused on identifying the most promising startup. And overall, we gave away $5,000 in prizes across all teams, which was quite a feat.
Yeah, I think the whole thing was quite a feat, right? Because going back to the origin story, which I think we should talk about next, you came up with this idea. I believe it was when we were at HIMSS. No, it was at Vive, right back in March. You said, "Hey, there are all these people here, and they're not building anything. Why are they not building anything? Let's put on a hackathon." And my response to you was, "What is a hackathon?" Like, I had no idea what one was, and this was our first one, right? It went really, really well. Got a bunch of great feedback, which we'll share some later. But the fact that in March we only knew what it was conceptually was pretty wild. And to that point, I think it's worth mentioning the help we had. We had an advisory team, right? And Paulus, you want to tell us about them and how you pulled them together to help us make this awesome event?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and that's a good point about tracing back the roots of the concept. I think there was just a good bit of frustration since we've attended many conferences in the last year. Um, each one really being a giant happy hour where people congratulate themselves for doing great work. But you have all this brain power, and I think there's a ton of appetite in, especially in the people who are in the audience, not necessarily speaking at the podium. And I always wish that event organizers, harness that energy and appetite and put it to, I think, some productive form of expression, through building. So that was, I think, the energy that drove this concept. And the actually there's so many people involved in this, in behind the scenes. And so it's really folks that we met at different conferences and have gotten to know each other over time, and we build on these relationships to, pull in Gus Roman from Turquoise Health, who was really the logistics sensei, Didi Einbinder, Stu Solomon, and then Dave Berner, all contributed in different ways and with their different skill sets. And as we were thinking about who's going to participate in the hackathon, it was really about finding the magic of having an engineer, a product person, and a clinical person to come up with something cool. And we really took that approach to creating the hackathon too, because we had engineers, we had product strategy person, and then we were the clinicians. So I think we kind of represented what a quintessential team should look like, and then build the hackathon with that team.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of just, I guess, magic around the hackathon, right? Just the fact that how it came together, the people we brought, and I think one of the surprising things for me was just how many participants we had, right? I think total it was around 200. Is that right?
So we certainly had more than 300 people on Slack at one point. Not everybody was actively engaged. Well, and for lots of reasons. Actually, some people registered and realized that they overcommitted and had to back out. And some people, part of that crowd, were sponsors, which brought their entire teams on board to be available and troubleshoot during the event. And we obviously had dozens of mentors throughout the weekend. So maybe we can actually zoom out and explain how the event was structured. I think that might be helpful to provide some context.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, it was a virtual hackathon, like you mentioned before, right? So everything more or less happened on Slack, which pretty wild. Just all these people talking, and we had a bunch of time zones, right? Do you remember exactly how many it was? It was like 17 time zones.
I actually tried to look up to find the screenshot because each time I had to send an announcement to all people in Slack, I got a warning that, are you sure you want to ping that many time zones? And I think it was about 17. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to look up the exact number, but yes, pretty impressive, and hundreds of people, and somewhat intimidating, I would say.
Yeah, and we looked it up. There are 24 time zones, which I guess makes sense because there are 24 hours in a day. And I think our next goal is to try to hit all of them, right? I'm sure there's some remote island somewhere where somebody's willing to hackathon. I think what was really cool about the engagement on Slack is some people came with teams, but a lot of them just came individually and got sorted into teams. And we got to see all sorts of engagement in different channels. Each team had a channel. And it was just cool all hours of the night, seeing people in huddles, messaging each other. What were some of the highlights in terms of participant engagement for you?
Well, I think that's completely right. So the way we've structured it is that everything happened in Slack, like you mentioned, and then we had different channels, some for logistics, others for questions, other channels were created for sponsors, where specific messaging would happen, and we also had mentor channels, and each team got their own private channel. So we would, and all admin folks were in each of the team's channels, so that you could keep an eye on what questions were bubbling up that maybe people were not surfacing in public forums. And you could also see when teams were huddling and talking live via video. And I remember on Sunday, the day of I guess the second and last day, I woke up and there are probably 16 teams going all at once, and it was pretty wild to see that so many people were, you know, uh, just really not slacking off and going hard at it. And some of the chats, I think we'll have to find screenshots, but people were saying, "Okay, I'm just gonna take a quick nap and I'll be back. You guys keep going." And yeah, it was just a lot of, I think, humorous interactions that was really a lot of fun to witness. Did not anticipate any of that So we mentioned mentors, but I think what makes sense is actually to even zoom out of how events started, right? So there was this whole element of figuring out who needs to apply, and we build up a good amount of hype on social media. Tons of people applied. We figured out who are the qualified applicants and admitted them. Then people had about a week to reteam, and we put people, those who were not, those who applied without a team, we spent time curating teams into the categories that each team would have a engineer, product, and a clinical person. And then we gave people a week before the hackathon started to reform teams in case something happened. And as you'd expect, with hundreds of people, just statistically, things are going to happen. And we had someone drop off because they gave birth, and someone's family member had all sorts of medical ailments that are kind of rare, significant events in someone's lifetime. We had dental emergencies and other things, and it was just almost, it felt like we were part of this larger village that did not exist beforehand. And so having that buffer time of about a week prior to the hackathon was also really helpful for people to find new team members and reform teams. Then we kicked off with a keynote speaker, Dr. Sarah Gebauer, which was a really, I think, cool way to nudge people to think about the potential of AI in healthcare. And then we more or less let people brainstorm and ideate and get to know each other the first night. And then starting on Saturday, we allowed the participants to connect with mentors. And throughout the entire weekend, we staggered a bunch of essentially office hours with different experts across different domains in healthcare and health tech. So, we had a lot of founders who were super technical and were able to steer teams and troubleshoot their technical projects. We had a ton of people who had deep clinical expertise and were able to validate ideas if something would stick or not. And we also had some design people helping out. And those mentors were different from the sponsors of the event. And also, I think what made it a pretty different experience from how some other hackathons exist is that some sponsors just slap their logo on, and this is a marketing expense for them. But the sponsors that we selected for were actually mentors as well. And they were in the weeds with the participants, troubleshooting how to incorporate their APIs into a product, or even, for example, I'll give a shout out to Lighted team, because they are a really cool company that essentially does software development, but they also do product development, strategy, and they have a design team to tie it all together. And so they agreed to essentially provide support at all of those levels of expertise throughout the event. And I think that was just really incredible, because one of the mentors reflected to us that as they were talking to a team, and the mentor had clinical background, they're saying, hey, you should maybe talk to this software company to figure out how you could troubleshoot this piece because they reached their knowledge limit. And the cool part was that you could just pull in that software person from the other company right into the same conversation almost immediately. And that almost never happens in the real world. And so I really do think that was a magical time, like you said.
Yeah, the engagement extended even beyond participant engagement, right? One of the things that we were talking about when putting it together were options. What would happen if people didn't engage the mentors, right? But that wasn't a problem that actually materialized. Like, everybody was super engaged, everybody loved it on both sides. So I think the participants got a lot of value from having mentors who are awesome, gave great advice, and the mentors had a lot of fun because the teams asked really good questions, and they were excited to help the teams build really cool things. So I think overall, yeah, just I think the energy came from everybody participating. one of the things when we were putting together the virtual hackathon was people were saying, oh, it's a lot more fun in person, right? And we should do in-person stuff. But I think we were able to replicate at least some of the energy virtually, right? What are your thoughts about doing this, our first one virtually versus what we had heard from people about in-person events?
Well, I think that we stuck true to our theme of trailblazing and doing something that is unfamiliar. And I think we were not discouraged by that, but that certainly was an element of diving into the unknown. I agree. I think obviously in person has its perks, but it also has its limitations. And I think sometimes it's not as inclusive if for those people, for people that can travel, that, there's funding involved and logistics are on a whole other scale. Whereas, and we were not working with a lot of capital, I think most of our capital was time that we invested in this. And so I thought that was a good combination of, I think the amount of work that we put in really had the best outcome with a virtual setup.
Yeah, the other piece was, yeah, you touched on was the sponsors, right? We had all sorts of sponsors. Well, there were different sponsors for different categories, right? And another cool piece, again, regarding the engagement was that everybody, I think for the most part, used somebody's product, and all the sponsors were very active. They had their teams on the ground and sharing their stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the sponsors we had and maybe some of the products that they were able to provide our participants?
Sure. Yeah. So, and I actually remembered what I was going to say is that in leading up to the event, there was a lot of cross pollination of introducing everyone to each other and people mingling. And actually, one of the companies got funded. So a sponsor got essentially funded by another sponsor, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, just because they were coming together for this event, and it was just serendipitous connection. So I thought that was super, super cool. And related to just debriefing and with some of the participants, um, some of the mentors that were in the event are now advisors for the ideas that came out of the hackathon that are now being formed as real companies. We don't know what's going to happen exactly, but just I think the level of the appetite to build during the weekend was really out of this world. And the fact that it didn't completely dissipate, it just kind of carried forward with a life of its own was really, really cool. And just on that theme of like building excitement that ripples after the event, there like Turquoise Health put out an article that was really a super nice way to summarize what happened, and they described certain companies that were participating, and then there was a shout out to one of the companies that didn't realize that they were being mentioned, and that person was really happy to hear about it, and it just you know stepping back, it's like someone else was describing somebody else that was all part of an event, an activity that did not exist prior to this weekend, and just seeing it all unfold, I think is like a really, really special feeling. um yeah, so let's talk about some of the sponsors that were part of the event. um we wanted to figure out how to align the tracks that we created, which had to do with Care Insights, which was about surfacing signal among the noisy data sets that exist out there. And so the different tracks had essentially sponsors that dealt in data. So Care Insights were sponsored by Turquoise Health, Gradient Health, and Tuva Health. And those companies provide data in different formats. You can check out our website for more details of what they do, but I do think that that was a really cool way for data companies to come together, offer their product to participants on a limited basis for the weekend, so that participants could get a taste of what it's like to work with some of the data sets that are available, and build new products. The track called Patient Empowerment was supported by Sanctuary Health, Craniometrics, and Curative. And Sanctuary Health provides essentially video education, patient education videos through APIs, and I think it's a pretty innovative company that really stands out among some of the other ones that are in this field. Then Curative is an innovative health insurance company, and Craniometrics is building a one-stop shop for Alzheimer's care. And it's really great to have them as the sponsor for patient empowerment category. The last track, Care Delivery, was all about optimizing and improving the experience of providing patient care. And we picked companies that represented different elements of this care delivery process. EMR is really serving as an important foundation for all of this. And the EMR category was represented by Healthy. We had a clinical decision support tool, AvoMD. Nabla was supporting us with their Copilot feature that essentially helps with transcription, voice to text. MetroPort is a really awesome company that's Y Combinator current batch. They are serving as an API for healthcare, and they can plug into a lot of things related to data. And I think some of the more interesting APIs that they have is related to wearables. And then Photon Health, they are focused on prescription sector, and also provided their tech support and APIs, which is great to have them.
Yeah, and one of the analogies that you had used leading up to hackathon was just giving participants ingredients, and all the sponsors, basically their products were the ingredients, and the participants got to mix and match them and talk to essentially the sponsors themselves, some of them upper leadership of the sponsoring companies who helped them use their product, develop APIs and troubleshoot. So that was really cool. One thing that was really fun for me, you mentioned we also had several VC sponsors. And at the end of the event, during the judging session, all our VC sponsors basically did a real life Shark Tank. So they looked through the decks of everybody who wanted to be judged for that section, and then picked the top 3. And in real time, those teams pitched the VCs, and then got feedback. And then the VCs picked. And that was fun. I think you and I were in and out because we were helping moderate the judging of the other sessions. But we were able to rewatch it, and it's up on our website, and it was a ton of fun. Any big takeaways from those, or I guess from that event?
Yeah, I think it was very not usual for this thing to be done in public. Well, it was happened during the hackathon, but usually these conversations of feedback and follow-up questions about someone's demo or a pitch don't always get the spotlight. And I think what was unique about it is that people had just built something which was fairly raw, and they were able to get feedback from people who wield a lot of capital and it can actually, enable the next step of building or development of this idea. And I thought that VCs did not really hold back. Like, they were able to be very candid with teams that were selected to be finalists, and I thought that was really great. And so we're really excited to be able to share that on our website, and anyone else can watch how this happens. And certainly things were not polished, and I think that's really cool. It was representative of how things happen in the real world.
Yeah, and every team's pitch is also on the site. And so we have opening, closing ceremonies, we have the real life pitch meeting, and everybody's products. So basically everything from the hackathon, or at least the final products, are up. Earlier you had touched on all the activity on social media, people sharing, liking, spreading, and that kind of pushed us to finally have our own LinkedIn page, right? So we have that going for us, which is pretty cool. Yeah, even after like 2 weeks after the hackathon, I think people were still tagging us and talking about how much fun it was. So I think really overall, the hackathon created some cool products. We got to engage great people. But at the end of the day, it was about bringing people together and generating some excitement, which was neat. Kind of jumping into our next thing. So right after the hackathon, we had a full-on sprint leading up to the beginning of June and putting on this hackathon. And pretty much as soon as the hackathon ended, we were in a full-on sprint to get our course up, right? So we did a primary care 101 course, which we brought a bunch of people together on Slack. Felt a little bit hackathon vibes, but it was pretty different. You want to give us an overview on the course and what we did there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we've been chewing on, ideating on for a while, and essentially, this the end of June marked the culmination of my medical training as I concluded residency, and having been in the trenches for 7 years now, or 6 years, and you've been out in the real world practicing as attending and running your own direct primary care practice. I feel like cumulatively, we have, over a decade of experience in the medical education system, in the advanced training portion of the residency, and then I also have some real life experience. And it was really, it sounds cheesy, but a celebration of our knowledge. I think we were able to pull together everything that we've learned so far, categorize it, and make it palatable for people who know very little about primary care. And we've myself having taken lots of courses that were outside of my regular training. In the health tech communities, there are a lot of people and organizations that put out different courses focused on health tech related things, and I've continued to not only support those people by taking their courses, but also create my own continuing education thing. And I've witnessed, having done probably 10 of them by then, I've seen what's worked really well and what could be improved, and then took all of those experiences and applied that to our course with your assistance and guidance. And then you did a lot of the heavy lifting for content delivery, because we created an outline and refined it and wordsmithed it a ton, and then you recorded really all of it, often after your working days. And it's incredibly that you just pulled it off. But yeah, I think that's kind of the idea, and then I can go into the different sessions that we've created. Essentially, it was built around 3 modules, and each of the modules had 5 sessions in it. So the first module was about just the general primary care overview. Session 1, we talked about what it takes to create a primary care physician, understanding motivations for the physicians, the market, financial pushes and pulls. We talked about different practice settings in which primary care gets practiced. We talked about who pays primary care, and how does primary care get paid. Module 2, we defined primary care across the 5 sessions. 1 focused on frameworks, discussed front doors of primary care. We discussed about the capabilities and scope of work in primary care. We touched on care coordination, and we also talked about the importance of continuity in primary care and how does that look across different stakeholders. And module 3, we dove deeper into the weeds on primary care operations. So dedicated a session on documentation, a session on care workflows. We discussed protocols at length. We reviewed anything related to medications, dispensing, prescribing. And then the last session was about orders. So anything related to labs, imaging, and DMEs.
I think overall with the course, when we first talked about doing it, we wanted to do a primary care 101 overview. And for anyone who knows anything about primary care, it's this like giant amorphous blob where anybody can play in it. And so I think one of the harder challenges was actually figuring out what to put in and what to take out, because certainly I think every single session we did could have been a course in and of itself. And we really had to figure out how to focus and leave room for potentially a 201 course spinoffs, which I think we're planning on pursuing with partnerships with whoever wants to help us in this endeavor. I think that'd be cool. And I think one of the more unique things about where we are, you mentioned this is the end of your training. Your last rotation was with me here outside of Richmond, Virginia. I feel like I worked harder than you. I was the one going through residency this month, but that was fun. But one of the unique aspects of where we are right now is, like you mentioned, I'm running a direct primary care clinic. I moonlight at urgent care, so I have those experiences still fairly fresh-ish out of residency. So I still remember those days and some of the details and how it worked. You're deep in residency, so clearly you still remember how the training is, med school, the whole working in a hospital system and all of that. And that's a unique experience, I think, that slowly erodes over time as we go into, specializing in what we do. Like, say, if I was in direct primary care for 10 years, and I might forget how residency was, or if you move on to whatever, then you forget how med school was, and we kind of lose some of that breadth. The other thing is we've been exploring a ton of stuff over the last year, right? Between all the conferences we go to, the people we talk to, the retreats we put together, and we've just had a very 10,000 foot view of primary care. And that's how we were able to create a lot of this content, was using that wide breadth of knowledge we had. So speaking of hackathon vibes, in addition to just the sheer content that we put on, I think the participation from people was incredible, right? So our course was this half recorded, half in real life thing done over Zoom and Slack, where during the recorded sessions, our participants or students could ask us questions or write comments in real time to Slack, and we would be responding. And then we would take some breaks to engage with people live on Zoom. And I think that was pretty popular, and everybody really enjoyed that format. We had all sorts of people, policy, tech, operators. Do we have clinicians as well? We did, yeah, clinicians as well. Just wanting to know more about the primary care space in general from a larger scale. And I thought that was great. It really pushed us to learn a lot, and people were sharing all sorts of resources that I think were really helpful, some of which I hadn't seen. Yeah, Paul, so what do you think about the engagement and some of the people we had?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during the first day, so the course was arranged. I think it might be helpful to have some context for those that have not looked at our syllabus, but basically it was done over 4 days, and each day, it was a Tuesday, Thursday over the 2 weeks. Each
Mhm.
day was about 2 hour session. Um, and after first, I mean, during the first day, we could barely keep up with all the questions coming in through Slack, because we essentially had a pre-recorded section that was 15, 20 minutes at a time, that we played for participants to listen and absorb, and also engage with, questions on Slack. And so people bombarded with us with a ton of stuff, and it was not only just us answering questions, but also other participants would chime in with their own experiences to someone else's question. And I thought that was really cool. I also, we received a ton of questions that we did not know, because we did not know what we did not know, in a way, right? And so that led us to go down the rabbit holes and find the answers, or connect with people who might know an answer. I thought that was really cool. I think the engagement was unique in a sense where, sometimes we talk trash about payers, and we had a payer in the class, and so it'd be fun to actually pull in people that were in the audience to actually answer some of the industry specific questions. And again, kind of the hackathon concept, that usually there are all these silos, and we've just been able to break them down by having this engagement platform, whether it is the hackathon or the course or something else that we do. And I think also kind of mirrors back to what we've done with our retreats, where we actually bring people in person and let them unplug and hang out at a cabin, that also are from all sort of complementary but different industries, right? Like our last retreat in May was bringing together, folks that do actuarial science and people that do data analysis and clinicians and founders. So I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, totally. I think to your point, right? We did a lot of soul searching and identity finding during the last month. Just saying like, look, we put together all these cool things. Like, what exactly do we do, right? That's probably the number one frequently asked question when we tell people about XPC. They're like, what is XPC? And certainly during all this flurry of activity, we were doing some identity finding. And like you mentioned, I think we really are just community builders, right? The hackathon, the course, the retreats, they're all kind of an excuse to bring people together to do cool stuff and to engage with some bright minds who are just looking to use their talent somewhere. I think that's pretty rewarding, and it's a lot of fun. And I think it's something you and I obviously enjoy doing. So, as an identity, I wouldn't say we know still yet what XPC is, but we're moving closer, and it has something to do with community and relationship building and connecting the right people to make cool stuff happen.
That's right. Yeah. And I think, I mean, this is somewhat of a passion project for us. And the fact that it really, we have our full-time jobs and responsibilities, but this is something that I think really complements and enhances and synergizes what we do during the day. And so I'm really excited to see how it continues to evolve and what new things we'll be doing. And we have some exciting adventures on the roadmap that we'll be sharing, I think, probably in the coming weeks. If we can find a way to um, not only create a space for this energy, but also to, through our networks, remove as many barriers as possible for people to go on and execute what they want to pursue. And this, I think it's really cool to facilitate that discovery process. And there are different ways to pull it off. I think we're still ideating of how to best do it. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens.